I wanted to address two other questions. I have enough strength right now. I don't often to carry me through. Notice the Paschal egg with our Lord, the life giver, light on the egg, painted by local person, I presume. I don't know where it came from. Somebody gave it to us. But it's nice to have it here as we approach Holy Pascha. Behold, the bridegroom cometh in the middle of the night, and blessed is the servant whom he shall find watching. I've been hearing a lot about uniting all Christians together to fight against secularism. There are many disturbing aspects to this call. In recent times, a lot of Christians have united to fight something, and they've lost every time. I remember an evangelical pastor telling me that some years ago they had a nationwide prayer. Everybody who was connected with this evangelical movement across the entire nation prayed that Parliament would not pass certain legislation, that legislation would fail in Parliament. And they all prayed mightily, had services, not Malevans, mind you, but they had prayer services, and the law passed. And some of them began to weaken in their faith. Because supposedly, you would say to this mountain, move and cast yourself into the sea, and that mountain would move and cast itself into the sea, just as the fig tree withered up suddenly. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And the other things that large groups of Christians have been praying and marching about, they've lost. So supposing the Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church joined together as one, and many of the Protestants began to cooperate, how would you fight against secularism, even with all of that unity, when Christians are one of the biggest causes of advancing secularism in our world and just simply cannot catch on? Too many of our people live in a rarefied world, in some ivory tower somewhere, whether it's the Vatican or wherever. Is it not clear that Christianity is losing the battle against secularism, no matter how much we unite together, no matter how much we stand in opposition to something, we fail time after time after time, and never catch on to the reasons why we have no moral voice in society. Because most of the proclamations that are being made in these adversarial situations are proclamations against other human beings. Proclamations aimed at trying to undermine democracy and trying to undermine other people's constitutional, charter, or civil and human rights. And we do it not with any kind of moral voice, but only with a hateful adversarial voice. In other words, we do not try to reach out to touch people's hearts. We try to bludgeon people on the head with a baseball bat. We try, and what happens is, we have become bullies in an era when bullying is hated and despised by an entire generation that is coming to power in our era, and has been coming to power since at least the 1990s. The demographic change has escaped our people who are trying to live in some medieval fantasy. In so many ways, the Vatican tries to live in medieval Europe, where they had power to burn people at stake and send people to the pit and the pendulum to torture them into obedience. We Orthodox Christians are pretending that we could still live in the Byzantine Empire, as if it was an absolutely perfect condition of the world. The patriarchs dying unnatural deaths and emperors being assassinated and emperors slaughtering tens of thousands of their own people, and there were many, many problems that we pretend didn't exist. So we want to try to present the world with something from 12th century Byzantium or from 12th century Europe, where you could still burn people at stake and torture people to death if they didn't agree with you. And with ideas that are absolutely wrong. If we want to look at the problem of secularism, we need first of all to look at the secularism within the church. How many priests out there in the Orthodox Church during the last election tried to bully people into voting the way they thought they should vote? And never realized that by doing that, they were bringing secularism into the church. Preaching one political party or another in your churches, preaching from the ambone against one political party and for another political party, you're just secularizing the church. That's all you're doing. And trying to, if you dance with Caesar, Caesar always leads. There is no political party, there is no politician who has real integrity and real honesty and is going to do any of the moral things they promise. I mean, look, the Republican Party had a serial adulterer, multiply married serial adulterer, running to be candidate for president of the United States, and everybody thought, oh, well, he's actually moral. He's just a serial adulterer, and adultery's not really that bad when a Republican does it. It's only bad when a Democrat does it. And Democrats will sort of, this Democrat was crooked and he took bribes, but it's really only bad when a Republican does it. It's not so bad when a Democrat does it. That's part of the deal. This is part of how the church is becoming secularized, by choosing sides of political parties within the congregation, within the parish, and priests preaching, instead of preaching the gospel, are preaching political parties. That's secularism, brothers and sisters, pure and simple. And why do we have to always be attacking people? Why can't we try to use some other method? First of all, setting an example, let all the bishops who hate another bishop stop hating them. Let the bishops who hate some of their priests stop hating them. Let the priest who hate some bishop stop hating them. Let the priest who hate another priest stop hating them. Get rid of all the hate within the church. And stop expressing hatred for people outside the church. With all of that going on, why should people listen to us? Why should they take us seriously? Secularism at least can offer justice under the law and can offer social justice. The church is not a democratic society. Democracy and religion are totally incompatible with one another. So stay out of the politics of it. Because what's happened is, so many priests, so many ministers, so many televangelists, so many bishops in the Anglican, Catholic, and Orthodox Church have become nothing in the world but bullies. And we present ourselves as bullies And the more we bully, the more we're hated. The more we bully people, the more we're disrespected. The more we bully people, the less people can possibly take us seriously when we talk about Jesus Christ and His gospel. So if we want to fight back against secularism, the first step is to stop being bullies. But nobody's going to listen to that, are they? We're still going to try to bully people because we think we have a divine mission to bully people. Okay, the Inquisition in Spain had that too. Let's canonize Torquemada. Let's reopen the pit and the pendulum. Let's start burning people at stake again. And we're doing it emotionally and psychologically. Why not just do it physically? Because we live in democratic societies that don't permit us to do it. Otherwise, I rather suspect we have people who would do just that. And to scream about Islamic fundamentalism, they're doing some things physically that we're doing mentally and emotionally to other people. And this is a real tragedy for us. We're not going to make a dent on the secularism and secular society around us by bullying. Bullying is hated and despised. It isn't loved, and it doesn't show love. We can say something is sin without being bullies. We can say it with heartfelt grief and sorrow. Moral outrage is a form of confession. We hate most in others what we fear most in ourselves. Moral grief is what Christ had in the Garden of Gethsemane. And that was the cup that He asked to have removed from Him. The cup of His moral grief over the condition of humanity. That is the image of Christ that we despise as Christian people. We despise Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. We don't want to have moral grief. We want to be moral bullies. Something that Christ never did. If we want to fight against secularism, forget about thinking that joining ourselves to various other Christian bodies is going to be effective. It's just going to make us feel that we can be bigger bullies than we already are in this world. And until we get a grip on that, and learn the difference between moral outrage and moral grief, and learn that this is really the meaning of Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. People who never read the Holy Fathers think that the cup was the cross. People who read the Holy Fathers know that the cup was His moral grief over the tragic condition of humanity. If we don't come to grips with this, if we don't pull ourselves out of 12th century Byzantium and 12th century Italy and Spain and face the realities of the 21st century, secularism is not only going to dominate the world out there, secularism is going to sweep into the church and dominate within the church. Electing one political party or another is going to do absolutely nothing. Look at the Republicans shifting why are they shifting now on same-sex marriage? Because that's where the votes are. The real politicians will sell their soul for votes. It doesn't matter whether they're Tea Party, it doesn't matter whether they're Kennedy Democrats, it doesn't matter who they are, they're politicians. To be a successful politician, the only thing you really need is enough votes and a good alibi. Or some cover story. Why bring that secularism of political parties into the church? All we're doing is bringing secularism in instead of fighting the secularism out there. Brothers and sisters in Christ, and especially any of the priests or bishops who might watch this, we've got to stop being bullies. and we cannot unite ourselves together in a bigger organization of pan-Christian organization, thinking that then we will have more power as bullies, that we can bully more, and through bullying more intensely fight back against secularism. That, brothers and sisters, is madness. We've got to bring ourselves into the 21st century and speak to 21st century people in 21st century language. 12th century won't do. And the gross superstitions that we try to force on people are also part of the problem. So let's dialogue about this. Let's have some dialogue about it. Let's converse with one another about it. And converse amongst yourselves. But I'd love to hear from you, your opinions about it. Don't try to bully me, because I won't pay attention to you if you try to bully me. Let's just have a conversation about it. Let's discuss it. You can disagree with me, and I can disagree with you. But I think I really want to ask that you think about these things prayerfully, but also take a good hard look at those people who think they're fighting against secularism and see how they're doing it and why they fail time after time after time after time. Of course, the hypocrisy and the bigotry has something to do with it. The biggest Roman Catholic homophobe in the United Kingdom, the Cardinal in Edinburgh, as you know, had to resign because he'd been having sex with the seminarians, who are men, by the way, in the Roman Catholic Church. Biggest homophobe, biggest outspoken voice against any kind of gay rights or anything, is actually sexually abusing some of his priests. Do you think people forget that the next day? Do you think that when you come along and bully people the next day, they don't remember who was bullying them yesterday and what he turned out to be? This is part of the whole dilemma. This is part of the problem. So think about it, pray about it, and let's have a dialogue about that as well. Let's have a decent dialogue. And you're welcome to disagree with anything I say, but I'm saying again, those of you who are, you know who you are, you claim to believe something but show no sign of believing in it, because you can be quite vile and vulgar. I don't like vulgarity, I don't like foul language, and it has no place in Christian dialogue. But anyway, write to me, talk to each other, and let's dialogue about this, and dialogue amongst yourselves about it as well. Thank you, and God bless you, and I think it's almost time to begin the bridegroom service here at the monastery, so we'll go and have this bridegroom service, and tomorrow we'll do a video talking about the bridegroom service itself, and how we understand it better if we read the book of Hosea, the book of the prophet Hosea, and then read Apostle Paul's words about marriage, and realize that the crown of thorns on Christ's head is his wedding crown with which he is crowned to the church. God bless you all, and please remember us in your prayers.